From Michigan Production Alliance, this is Barton Bund.
And I'm Mark Adler, and this is MPA's episode 5 of our Safety Dispatches.
Mark, we've covered a lot, but we've got to cover something big. This is kind of one of the moments we've been waiting for, which is the release of the film, and video and television white paper. But also, I wanted to start out talking about what was released as far as how live events can happen now that we're reopening. There was a big thing of guidelines I read through last night. What did you think of what came forward?
So the Event Safety Alliance put out a white paper. That's the most recent one, and it goes under the umbrella of most of the white papers that we've read. But of course, being that this involves food and restrooms and large seating capacity, the big thing that I wonder about is how is this going to happen in practice? The training for people is going to be immense.
You've got to train your audience to begin with. I mean, that's what they said first. You got to release a whole ton of information. And let's say that you put this out, and let's say that it was for did this white paper, is this the sort of thing that covered events as big as like a sporting event or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I wonder how it's going to account for, I mean, there's the seating, which you've got to seat people far away. There's the concert or the game itself or whatever. I mean, sporting events, you can't play basketball and separate. Like there's certain events that just can't happen.
You know, I paid for my front row seats, man. You know, I paid for my courtside seats.
Yeah.
I don't think it's happening.
No, I was supposed to go see the Grateful Dead in a couple of weeks, and that's just our event got canceled. I'm really bummed about it. Yeah. But anyway, so what I was wondering about is how, like, putting these things into practice. What are the things that we're stumbling up against? Because I looked at some of that and I just said, getting that number of getting the public, handling the talent or the performer is one thing. Handling everything backstage, that's one thing. Handling the public, that is quite something else. And how the public is going to come in and have to adhere to the rules, which are as uptight as, this is like getting on an airplane. This is like getting, this is getting your temperature checked. This is metal detectors. This is new layers of safety that how are people going to respond?
Right. They're going to have to train the trainers. They're going to have to train the audience somehow, issuing documentation when the public gets a ticket. I mentioned to you earlier before we were on that the Detroit Zoo is opening soon, and they're only letting their members in. So that, cuts it down from the huge population to maybe 1,000, maybe 500 people on a particular day. And they're going to have to be educated when they get their tickets, where to park, how to be in the zoo. So now we bring this to the film industry. A lot of us work in these venues, so we're going to have to be trained to set up in this new world. And that's one side of it. And now we have the film industry, which is a big part of what we do. And that isn't even thought about yet in the stimulus and, coming back. I haven't heard when we're coming back.
Okay. The white paper is out. I now that we've talked about a bunch of different sets of guidelines, including the super futuristic Tyler Perry guidelines, which are amazing,
That's right.
and describe a quarantine locked down, kind of creating a dome, a bubble. And then there's this one, which is all about, they mention hand washing stations. They mention, they talk about, it has some level of detail when it came to waste, when it came to deliveries, when it came to HVAC. It had some of that in there, right?
I'm very happy about the way they've laid these things out. And we have to understand that they are living documents. I just heard a piece of a podcast talking about the fact that they are, once again, living documents. They're going to have to return to them because, in my opinion, I think that in practice, many of these things are going to have to be altered from what is on paper.
Well, and our guest today is Marvin Towns, who is an all-around film worker, director, producer, and also is going to be, could very well be your first assistant director and your first line of defense, your lead safety officer in some of these cases. And that's what it says in the document, is that the first AD and the safety officers that are going to be assigned and things like that are going to take everybody through. Shall we bring out our guest and talk about some of this stuff in practice?
Absolutely. Meet Marvin Towns.
Welcome, Marvin.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Of course. Marvin, what do you make of the guidelines and what you've seen, and how do you think it's going to translate into practice?
Fellas, I've pretty much read every white paper, especially the DGA and PGAs. And you know, I was listening to your introduction in the beginning, and Mark, you're right. Mark, you too. You know, pretty much everybody is saying the same thing right now, from SAG, DGA, PGA, and what they're saying is basically nothing. Because we all know in our industry, first of all, it's impossible to social distance. We just can't do it, you know? And, you know, they've even, one of the craziest things that I read was replacing extras digitally. You know, everything that they've talked about so far has shot budgets through the roof. You know, I've been doing budgets for damn near 30 years. And if you go by these guidelines and let's say try to budget a $5 million film, your $5 million film is probably going to double. And can you imagine where shoot schedules are going to be now? You know, a 20, 30-day shoot now is 50 days.
Right.
If we go by white papers, I say.
We're talking about productivity here, right? I mean,
exactly.
100 pages, you know, no.
You know, listen, we know that we work 14 hours a day at minimum. We know that. We know that. So how the hell are you gonna, you know, what are your days going to be? Well, how many pages are you gonna be able to get if you know, first of all, you got to double up on makeup and hair and everybody. Damn near for everybody there, you're going to have a separate makeup and hair person. The grips work, the electricians work. Then your camera crew comes out and work. You know, Mark, your team has to come out. And so I think everybody right now is just throwing stuff out there because with COVID-19, for our industry, you can't put up plexiglass. That you can't. We can't solve our issues without having a vaccine by doing some of the things that you'll see at Target, you know, or Walmart, you know, and mask. How we talk to each other, you know, how do you do that?
It's hard enough to hear you on without a mask.
Yeah, exactly. And just the contact, like, you know, my job is a DJ UPM. People are in and out of my office all day, and I have to go to this set 2-3 times a day. And my business is talking to everyone. You know, there's issues. And how does a director,
right?
How does a director work?
That's true. And your office, if you're on set as an AD, for example, I think your office is in one of those star trailers. How big is that?
Right, exactly. And probably it's the size of this room I'm in now. It's let's say 10 by 20.
If that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard to
you know?
Is anybody does anybody have this in? Is anybody planning a shoot right now according to these guidelines? And what are they coming up against? I mean, is anybody getting? I mean, do we have a sense of when things are starting up, if at all?
Well, I can tell you this because a good friend of mine is the head of production of What's Left of 20th Century Fox, Fred Barron, and Fred's actually at home chilling at his pool. because he said they have nothing on their schedule right now. And he also knows what's going on at Disney because that's basically who he works for now, you know. So I know that they don't. And I talked to Bill Mechanic. Mark, you know Bill, don't you?
I do, yeah.
The producer for me, yeah. I talked to Bill a couple of weeks ago, and he had a couple of productions that he was kicking up, and Bill said zilch zero, and he was shooting in LA for one movie and in Australia for the second. Nothing.
You know, I haven't seen. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to wondering at, you know, it's always about the money, follow the money. And I think there's a number of things that are going to drive these productions. And one of them is insurance and bonding of the film, right? What can you speak to about?
That is huge, because no one wants to accept the responsibility. No one, your lead actor test positive, you're shutting down. You know, because you can't shoot around them, because that lead actor is already exposed not only who they're working with actor-wise, but they've exposed pretty much the entire crew.
That's right.
And so it has to step down. Who is the bond company going to step in and take care of that? Absolutely not. They're not going to. Right now, they're not going to do it. And if they were to say yes, we will, can you imagine what those premiums are going to be? For, let's take a $10 million film. The production insurance package for a $10 million film is about $250,000. Okay?
Right now.
Think about, right now. Think about what that insurance premium would be if they have to take in consideration all of what has to happen with what we do. You're going to have an insurance premium of $2.5 million, probably 25%, if not more, because the stakes are so much higher now. And as it relates to bonding, who's going to want to, how do you know who to bond? Will they bond me, which they would normally do it easy, you know, without a problem? But
right.
This is different because I've never dealt with this. So who are they going to trust to bond?
That's a very interesting point. Who are they going to trust to bond? Actors are insured separately, are they not? You know,
yeah, above the line is insured separately, but you know that's more for injuries, and you know that, and you rarely use that. You rarely use that. You know, we rarely worry about insurance for actors, because I think in all the years I've been in, and I think we've had to bring the bond company in 50-something films, I'd say 3 times. And only one actor I remember, well, 2, stuntman on one show, and Sean Penn broke his leg on another. We shut down for 8 weeks. But that's in 50-something projects, you know?
Sure.
So, yeah, the likelihood of, you know, an actor prior to this, you know, but now with COVID, what's the likelihood of an actor coming down with something? It's pretty high. Trouble
in the bubble, man. Yeah. Can't have
the trouble
that.
in the bubble is it's just the guidelines are one thing. The guidelines lay out something for you know, like some of these guidelines might work for. Are there certain types of productions that these guidelines could work for, such as news or broadcasting, or something that's a little smaller, or that's, you know, did these guidelines don't really apply to like a real film where you have to, you know, like,
no,
that's what
you're right. Yeah, no, you're right, because let's see, you know, news and some live programs are doing it now. You know, people are, it looks crazy. You know, everybody's working from home. They've social distance on the set. So they figured their thing out for whatever that's worth. But, you know, that kind of doesn't apply to us. But you said something that actually is a carryover to what we were online talking about. And you know, Tyler Perry made this big thing about what he's going to do. And when I read it, I just busted out laughing.
Really?
You know, because what he's planning to do if you've ever been down to a studio in Atlanta, you know, he's got this self-contained entity, more so than one of the other studios in Hollywood or in London, because since it's an old army base, they have barracks, they've got all of these houses for the officers. So what he's saying he will do is he's going to put this bubble over his production, which means, and here's the thing, because Tyler shoots unlike anybody that I've ever, you know, worked with. In
Fast,
that,
right? Really,
man,
like output.
An entire 13 episode season in a week.
What? How?
Yeah.
How do you do?
Okay.
The guy.
And I BS you not, okay? Because I don't know if I got one over here. I BS you not. Because I spent last summer working with him, and the first shoot schedule that I saw, I thought it was a joke.
Really? Just
8 cameras. 8. Of those 8, 6 are steady cams.
sure. So that's
6 Steadicam teams, like 6 camera teams.
Yeah, but 2 teams. So he's got 12 operators.
Yeah.
And he's literally has 6 operators sitting on the sidelines to take over from the ones who are working.
He's got to have to pare that back now.
I was trying to convince him to pare it back then, because the thing is, you know, he does everything in one take. There is no rehearsal.
He's got coverage.
And he's got coverage that then has to go to his editorial, and you've got to get out all the cables, right? All the people in the shot, because his thing is that one of these cameras I have it. You know, and that's his thing, God love him. But at the same time, IOTC, DGA, they're not going to go for everyone, because you're working 24 hours. Because, you know, when we're on location, we're paid to be on location. If you lock someone down in his studio, that is technically a location shoot. I don't care if you live around the corner. Because once you're overnight, your location. And as everybody knows, those rates jump through the sky. And even though Tyler's productions are fast, his budgets are not. His budgets are just as big as everyone else. And I still question the methodology behind his budgets, but that's his thing. So even with him, his budgets are going to go through the roof. And, you know, we got to remember, it's not his money, it's Viacom's money. Will they go for it? You know, so, and you're also saying, I live in Atlanta, but for 1, 2, 3 weeks, whatever length of time, I can't see my family. My family can't come and visit me.
Yeah, you're on location. You don't even get to go out for dinner.
You don't get to leave his facility.
Is that a condition under which, let's say that it was a good gig, are you going to want to work under that condition, though? I mean, you what?
No way on the planet that I do it.
No?
No. Because I still think that the likelihood of you catching something have just gotten pretty high. And the stress that a department head is under under those conditions, you know, at this point in my career, it would be a hard no for me.
They have a provision in the guidelines for mental health as a response to stress. I love it now. There's one paragraph. There's one little paragraph in there, and it says, mental health, it may be very stressful working under these conditions, so we may have to encourage mindfulness training. Mindfulness training.
Yeah.
Like, it's not so bad because there's mindfulness training. I mean, I'm looking at it as are regular film workers going to be able to handle this, and and let's say even if Tyler Perry accounted for everything and gave everybody a great time, and it sounds awesome, and there are movies on the lawn, and there's activities, and he's got everything right there on campus. This is only for Tyler Perry's production. There are so many other kinds of productions out there that can't handle the stress right now. I'm just wondering how.
Exactly. Great point. And, you know, Tyler's claim to fame is he hires a lot of new people. He gives a lot of people a start, and there's only seasoned people barely at the top. I was the most seasoned person there. And he's got this huge operation. So we can take it because we've been around. But these younger ones, I was watching people break down under the best of conditions at his place, under the best of conditions.
What? Why? Because of just the pace of the
pace.
shoot?
I mean, that pace is just, it's grueling. It is grueling. Yeah. And he has a tendency, because here's the other thing, is he won't just shoot one show during the week. At one point, we had 4 different shows going at the same time. So one day I could be shooting the Have and Have-Nots. The next day it would be the Oval. The next day would be Sisters. And you've got to coordinate not only the actors, you've got to coordinate sets. You've got to coordinate crews. You've got to, you've got a whole nother rigging crew someplace else. And people are just going, everybody has to keep up. So at best, working under those conditions is tough for us.
Yeah.
So with juniors, if you throw in, now we're going to put everybody in this bubble, I personally don't see how it'll work. I don't see it because I've experienced his.
So even under Tyler's, like, when I read his paper, I was like, these are ideal circumstances for a certain type of production. This is the way that this would work. And it's a cool proposal, but you're still saying, even under the best of circumstances, that this is close to, this is not practical. This is not fully possible. I mean, when you read these things, do you say, yeah, let's go to work? Or do you say, whoa, 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 this is way off?
You say, whoa, 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 this is way off. That's what you say.
Yeah.
Because under the best, and see, Tyler can come out with something like that because very few people, unless you've been there, know how he shoots. So it might sound like, because we're doing one movie, and we're going to stay, and it's going to be one happy family, and we're going to stay on the lot, and I'll try to shoot quicker. Yeah, okay. But no, we're talking about 4 different projects, maybe 8 different projects, juggling actors, juggling crews, juggling all of this stuff. When you know that,
and safety. You've got to have this safety stuff, like, at every checkpoint, at every moment, every temperature gauge, every, like testing. It becomes, it's not feasible. Even if you're able to put out at a fraction of what Tyler Perry is doing. And I admire the guy. I think it's incredible, the science of how he does it. However, now you're adding in you're adding in a lot of time and a lot of expense.
Think about this. Let's say 6 a.m. crew call. After the 6 a.m. crew call, you've got to hit everybody and take their temperature. So let's say you're testing 75 to 100 people. How long does that take?
Right. They're talking about staggering crew calls to make that easier, but still, that's a lot of.
You can stagger crew calls all you want, but you can't stagger shooting. So, and they'll stagger your call, Mark, but they won't, it's not the same time as a sound mixer, or it's not the same time as camera. Well, you 3 all work together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're barely running your own cables because the electrician has to run your line, so, but you guys are on a different time, so staggering crew calls works for actors.
Well, we're talking about reducing down to a 10-hour day too. Wasn't that a part of one of the initial proposals? Was shortening the entire day?
Yeah. And who can so a 20-day shoot schedule will now become 50. Exactly. 10 hours. What can we do? Go to lunch?
Right. I've been on those staggered crew calls before, and it just means a shooting call remains the same. They want to shoot at 8 o'clock, 8:15 maybe. But, that means that sound and video are like set up while they're, how do you do that? Yeah, that's very difficult. So let's now bring it down from a big production to a commercial. how do you think it'll work on a commercial?
Well, and offline we have to talk about that, because you sent me something that I have a conversation with one of the auto companies about. Well, because that's a little bit easier depending on the size. Because
Sure.
a lot of commercials, I'm sure you both have been on commercials that are the same size as the feature. So you've got some of the same problems. But if you've got a 6-8 person crew for commercial, and depending on what it is, if it's running footage for a car, or a dentist office, it's a little bit more practical. Plus, on commercials, we all know we kind of skirt the rules a little bit because it's a little bit looser. And on commercials, we tend to work with the same people a lot over and over again. So we kind of understand, because one of the other big factors that I see in this is trust.
Big factor.
And we, like we say, we all know each other, so we trust each other, and we also trust each other we're going to tell the truth, But if you've got people who you don't know, do I trust that person that they didn't have COVID before, that they're not living in the house with someone who has it? Because you can be, you can have it, you can be a carrier
Sure.
with no symptoms. So the whole trust factor, and do I trust the production that their best interest is us and not what the end product is? So
Right.
I see that as a huge thing, a factor is, who do you trust? So on commercials, because we all tend to kind of work with the same people, there's more of a trust factor. And especially in this market, our commercial shoots tend to be smaller. So it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier, to handle with commercials.
Right. And the insurance issue remains an issue.
Well, the good thing about, especially with car commercials, car commercials, they give you a rider and you're insured. Your whole production is insured by them. So whatever GM, Ford, or Chrysler, every time I do something with Ford or GM, their blanket insurance covers me and everybody with me. So I never have to worry about that.
Right, but explain this one. I'm thinking that if insurance companies are driving productions, they're going to require certain things in terms of, is PPE an expendable, or is production providing that, and all the things that go around that?
It will be expendable. Any cost associated after you walk on a set has to be borne by the production, period. We're not going to, you can't ask someone to go out and buy 20 N95 masks, for their crew that you're switching out every other day. You just can't do that, because call it an expendable, call it a box print, call it whatever, but that's something that's going to have to be borne by the production times the number of departments that you have. And in a production office, how do you social distance in a production office?
That's it. You're exactly right. Production office, I mean, we've talked in the past about corporate jobs where you're backstage in a corporate facility. Even that's difficult because the director has to sit, somewhat close to the AD.
But haven't they talked about some of these being remote? Like some of these would happen via Zoom or something, like certain departments get to be isolated out and aren't on set?
Commercials, we can do it in commercials, and that's what they mark the equipment that you turned me on to, because with commercials you can, because everybody knows the agencies send 20 people out to hang out with you. The good thing is we can now tell them, we'll remote everything back to the client, so you guys don't have to be here. So from that standpoint, it's lovely for us because we don't have to deal with it.
Right. Streaming. Yeah. We're going to have to.
Exactly. You can shoot and move on without 20 different opinions. So that's cool. But, in film and episodic television and all that, you kind of can't. And how do you remote a department?
Right.
And you don't want to. That's the thing. I mean, I think that we have a workflow that is collaborative and is creative, and it's a lot of the things, the way that we like to work isn't really the way it's laid out, you know, according to these guidelines. I think that the way that departments want to communicate is suddenly the hardest thing, is just person-to-person communication.
And that's it, because let's face it, you know, filmmaking has not changed basically in 120 years. We're pretty much still doing, the equipment has changed, but we're pretty much doing the same thing that they were doing 120 years ago.
Absolutely true.
You know? So now all of a sudden we're being asked, because of the pandemic, to change the way that we non-social distancing people work together. You can barely do it in animation. For us, it becomes very, and I think I told you this, guys, this before we started. I was on a DGA call because once a week, and I decided to join a few, and I wanted to join because Ronnie Howard was on. And finally, after, you know, we've been getting all this crap in from the DGA, Ronnie Howard at the end of it, and he stops everyone. He said, so what you guys are telling us is basically nothing. You know nothing. And first time I chimed in, I said, thank you so much for saying that. You know, because we're hearing the same thing, SAG, IATSE, DGA, whatever the PGA is worth, you know, everyone, that white paper is basically the same across the board. Nobody's saying anything different. And when you look at it, what is it really saying? It's saying, here's all the things that best case scenario we would like to do, but what is the practical application of everything that they're saying? Right now, I don't see it, and most people don't see it. Short of a vaccine, what do we really do? Think about the cost of catering. Now, and remember, walking breakfast is in all of our contracts, right? So you get to work. You get to work, and the caterer has to have pre-packaged burritos for everybody, right? You know what? And then the same thing for lunch. When we scout out lunch locations, now we're gonna have to scout out lunch locations that basically you want to be outdoors if weather's permitting. You've got to have more tables and chairs, and you've got to have a caterer whose ticket is now going to shoot through the roof, because you've just added more time to his job because everything has to be prepackaged. So just if you look just at catering, and then Bart, I think you were talked about, let's talk about waste removal. You know? Yeah.
They said that PPE just goes out with the regular waste. I noticed that. Is that true? Is that, or I thought that PPE, once you took that off, that was like a biohazard, and you had to like, I've seen conflicting things that say you have to pack it.
In every other industry, it is a biohazard, because if you have it, it's going to live on that.
So what the hell? Why are we exempt? I was looking at that like, what industry? This is not consistent with the rest of the world. I was looking at that as not realistic.
Keep in mind that PPE, you know, it's going to die on there. It's not actually as much as you say.
In how long? But how long will it take?
Yeah.
And let's face it, one of our unions better bring that up.
Right.
Otherwise, they're negligent. You know, they failed because they need to bring that up. But what you've also added is a cost. Another cost on top of everything. And in our industry, let's face it, the bottom line with all of this, everything we do is money.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you're doing a commercial for $250,000, with everything we're talking about now, you have to, you know, your $250,000 budget is now what, 300, 325?
Sure. Right. You're saying it just grows exponentially.
You know?
So one thing that I'm fairly confident about is that, you know, we've always had OSHA rules on set. We've had safety rules on set. we're just layering them. So, you know, we've had to adapt to make it work, because those safety rules aren't necessarily things that we can, you know, that are all often, you know, followed. You know, guys stepping on a case, riding with my gear in the back of a, you know, rider truck, you know, not necessarily kosher, but we try to adapt, make it work. And that's what we're going to have to do here.
I'm waiting for our, listen, I have it here. I'm waiting for our next DGA safety course.
Right, that's huge.
Because we had, let's say, the last one I took was in 2019, March of 2019, through Safety Pass. I had to do the Directors Guild Producers Training Program, and then General Safety, you know, which is an online course that I do because I'm not in LA. And so now I'm waiting for something to come across and says you have to do another one. But what do we do?
Yeah, you bet it will come too.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be something that's totally ridiculous, because like Ronnie was saying, you know, the truth of the matter is, for what we do, it's tough. It's very tough, because the nature of what we do is contact. It's contact. You know, I think the mental health thing needs to be in play now, because the reality is, how long are we going to be out of work?
That's right. Got to get back. I mean, we'll break the economic back of, you know, the industry that is a how many $billion is the industry? 439 billion.
Man. Yeah. 30, 40 billion easy. I mean, and it's, you know, all of us, we've made money and we've saved money and all that, but how much, you know, is a year sustainable? You know? So, you know, and just, I was starting it, I think, Mark, you and I talked about it, I was prepping another project that was shut down, and the partners on that project were in India. So it became untenable because they shut down first. Now I've got these actors in India that there's a whole new, you know, safety protocol that has to go on. There's a ton of stunts, you know, so, and that was just a small project, relatively small project. What's happening with these bigger projects?
Right. That's what's going to, the industry is, you know, still, you know, finding its way to back. And I think it's trickling. We've mentioned earlier on these other dispatches that, you know, crews are trickling into work, education, medical, commercials. I've seen a lot of animation recently too, because they can't do anything else. But, you know, these are the kind of things that these safety dispatches are all about. And, you know, I've got to thank you for all your insight, Marvin. It's
oh no, my pleasure. You know, any chance I get to chat with you, you know, I'm up for it. And Bart, listen, man, it's a pleasure meeting you.
It's a pleasure, man. And you know what's great about this is that when I read these papers, I start to say, okay, here's the level of what I might expect if I were to go onto a set next week. But what talking to you, and the more and more we talk about all this stuff, is just learning how much further we have to go to put this stuff into practice. And I just hope that that they're listening to your feedback, and that they're responding to what the industry is saying is going to be possible and what is not. Because I'm just wondering what kinds of projects are even feasible under these guidelines. It's just absolutely, it's a mind-boggling thing. And until we have a vaccine, I don't see a lot of these things being at all possible.
You know, it's interesting because what I've seen with my industry friends all over the country who've been around as long as me, or longer, or maybe a little shorter, is there's an odd phenomenon that's happening is people are starting to talk retirement. We don't retire in this industry, really. We just keep working because we enjoy what we're doing. But I've got friends who are talking about it's really not worth it. Maybe now's the time for me to get out. But if we do that, who's going to be there to teach this younger generation how to actually do what we do?
Yeah, good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That is amazing. That's so awful to think about, but I'm getting murmurings of that too.
Yeah, yep. And that for me is scary because I like working with seasoned pros. You know, the kids are cool, but I like seasoned pros because we know what we're doing and we can read each other's minds.
Right.
And, you know, the possibility of something going wrong, you know, are minimized because we all know. And we're not, and we do it for the love of the art. You know, it's also, you know, to get paid. But our mindset is a little bit different than cowboys coming into the industry. And with this pandemic being over our heads, now is not the time for cowboys.
Yeah.
No, I think that's one of the
I'm
scariest
about to
things.
slide into that era that, you know, once you turn 60, you know, we're supposedly more susceptible to the disease, and I'm Black too. So I'm not looking to take any risk on anybody's set.
Yeah.
No, and I don't want anybody to feel encouraged to take risks. I hope that people keep fighting this thing and keep saying, wait a minute, that makes zero sense. I can't work under those conditions. You know, like that's what when I'm looking at it as talent, I'm just looking at it like, I can only do so much of my job in this environment. There's only certain things that are even remotely possible, and I have to look at it and say, I'm not comfortable. Yeah. I'm not comfortable. You know, this doesn't look safe to me, or this doesn't look complete to me. And I keep having to look at it and say, how much am I willing to sacrifice, or am I going to be, you know, like how long is it going to be before I go back to work because I'm just not satisfied with what I'm seeing.
And who do you talk to if that's the case? Who do you talk to?
Yeah, how do I follow up with? I honestly, I have talked with a little bit with some of the SAG people, and they're sort of like, well, you can lodge a complaint here, you can talk to this person over there, but it won't, you know, really, if you're not comfortable, you get the hell out of there yourself. And somebody else would.
Exactly.
I'm concerned about that, but I think most people deep down are feeling a lot of what we're feeling, and they're like, yeah, I can't really go back to work until I have all of these things in place or until I have been vaccinated. I honestly don't feel, I don't feel this is complete at all. I mean, me personally, you know, like there's too many, as a germaphobe already, it's like too many things that, you know, involved.
Yeah. And, you know, you're touching on that whole trust issue. You know, I would trust you two wouldn't lie and you've been vaccinated if there's a vaccine, but how do I trust people that I don't know?
Sure. That's true.
Yeah.
Very good points. Absolutely.
Well, this moment that we're at, it's absolutely incredible. And Marvin, you've pointed up some things, and you've been willing to come through and say these things that I think need to be said, and I think it's essential. And it's going to be this kind of honesty and this kind of like reinforcement of the right values, which are trust and professionalism, and you know that when you're on a crew together, you got to, it's like being in combat or something like that. I mean, you've got to trust one another with your lives.
Yes, we are an army that goes into war together, and we have to be all for one for all. That's how we work. That's how we've always worked. And any deviation from that, it's going to lead to disaster.
Thank you for that, Marvin. That's a great way to put it.
Well, for this and more, I want folks to come on down to mpami.org. I want you to follow us on Facebook, because we're continually putting out not just the information, but we're continuing the discussion. You know, we're not just putting out the white paper. We're going to put out the responses too, and we're going to make sure that we hear from people, and we try and answer the questions before we go back into production. Let's answer some of these questions so that we can make sure that we're doing this safely and without. We're mitigating every risk that we possibly can. Oh, man. Marvin, you're a warrior, man. I really appreciate what you're doing out there.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We got to catch up.
Okay. We will. Take care.
For this and more, join us down at, join us again at mpami.org. And this is Marvin Buns.
And I'm Mark Adler. Watch us on our Facebook group page, as well as the website and our LinkedIn as well. Check you later.
All right, we'll see you next time.